Okay. Hello and welcome. Thank you for joining me today on Sylvia's Inquiries on Social Services. I am Sylvia, and can you please introduce yourself by stating your name, your title, and the agency you work for and how long you've been there?
Okay. Hi, my name is Robin Afenowicz, and I am the Trauma and Resiliency Trainer and Trauma Healing Specialist for Care7. My background is in justice studies and clinical mental health and psychology, with a focus of somatic interventions to trauma resolution.
And how long have you been with the agency?
I've been with the agency about 6 years in various different roles.
Oh, okay. Okay. To my knowledge, it began in 1997 with the Tempe Police Department and Tempe Medical Rescue. Is that correct?
Care7, yes.
Okay. And do they still play a major role with the agency today?
Yes, we have a lot of collaborative partnership with fire and with PD. All of our crisis units are dispatched with PD and fire. And then from there, we can best meet the needs of the individual who requested response and determine, is this a service that requires support for mental health? Is this a service that requires, victim support, family support, or other social services supports?
Okay. And also, to my understanding, Care7 began as an all-volunteer effort with only one part-time staff member. Now, 24 years later, there are over 60 employees. Is that correct?
Yes.
Nice. Okay.
Yes.
The mission statement for this agency is Care7 prides itself on our continuum of care. This means that we encounter clients at the point of crisis in their lives, and we continue our support, assistance, and referral throughout healing and recovery. Okay. As a trauma-informed care educator, what do you see that is problematic within the organization?
Within Care7's organization?
Yes.
I think our biggest obstacle is just really, well, I don't think it's an obstacle from us internally as much as it is, working with other agencies. So I think agencies in general are learning what the best ways, policies, procedures, and practices are to instate cohesive and smooth collaborative efforts to provide that wraparound continuum of care. I think that the obstacle is that it's difficult when other agencies provide other supports and we provide other supports, and just finding a common shared language and a common, policy and procedure that is consistent across the board. So I think it's not that people aren't willing, but that, it's just everybody has their own policies and procedures, and we do work very collaboratively with a lot of other agencies. So, that can be a challenge, making sure that we're all understanding the process in the same way.
Okay. And what do you see as problematic within the community?
Oh gosh, how long do we have?
Right, right.
Well, I would say that it really, that is a general, I joke about it, but there are so many concerns with the community. The focus obviously for the last couple of years has been with the pandemic and then subsequent shadow pandemics. And the shadow pandemics are related to all of the underbelly experiences of adversity that our community is experiencing adjacent to or beneath that larger pandemic umbrella. And this is the, increase in mental health calls, the increase and intensity of domestic violence, the increase in adaptive crime, the increase in substance use, people experiencing homelessness, job loss, the increase in collective grief, the increase in suicidal ideation, the increase in feelings of displacement amongst many different communities, communities within communities. And I would say a big part of the shadow pandemic is what's arrived in terms of, in this time, a lot of important issues regarding equity, diversity, colonialism. Sorry, I have an egg in my mouth still.
It's okay.
And some of those oppressive systems that we're also trying to investigate as well. So, in terms of issues with community, we are all experiencing varying degrees of trauma and collective trauma. And certainly that collective trauma is bringing to surface any pre-existing trauma that has gone on, and then all of the subsequent historical trauma prior to that. So, it's a very overwhelming time in the community. We are not stable across the board. I think stability is something that we're all trying to regenerate. So,
Right.
Community is as small as a singular individual to a family unit to the, that rippling effect to the greater community. So,
Right.
yeah.
Right. And you actually touched on some of the next questions that I had. So some of the services and programs that you offer are targeted towards what type of population?
We don't target towards any population. We
Okay.
try to be as diverse and inclusive as possible.
Okay.
Right now, we are taking greater community, or with the onset of the Family Advocacy Center, it's really important that we're getting diverse input for our, and community outreach to make sure that we are really representing all members of the community. Most of our programs do offer all of our services in at least Spanish, and we're really improving greater capacity with that as well. And really, under the trauma-informed or through the trauma-informed lens, it by nature, trauma-informed is about inclusion. It is about, accountability, transparency, responsibility. It's unfortunately, a slow process to be received by already established institutions.
Okay. And okay, and you might have already gone over this. I just kind of jumped right into the questions, but can you describe your role? What is it that you specifically do?
Yeah, so I have a couple different roles here. My primary role right now is what is called the Trauma and Resiliency Trainer. I think of it more as an educator position. And this is where I go out into the community and I educate. I've created a multi-phase level of training based on trauma-informed practices and principles. So the first phase is understanding ACEs, adverse childhood experiences, and the impact that has on long-term health, mental health, physical health, behavioral health, learning loss, the long-term effects of adverse childhood experiences. Another phase of that training is really discussing the intensity of toxic stress amongst not just as children. So ACEs focuses on those years 0 to 18, but to also then approach the topic of toxic stress in terms of post 18 and on. Another phase of the training is trauma-informed applications, policies, and procedures. And this has a lot of subcategories to it, but going into, so for example, I work very closely with all of our Tempe elementary schools, middle schools, and Tempe Union High School District. So going in and helping our administrative support, teachers, educators understand what the best policies and procedures are that incorporate trauma-informed practices, which are race and equity, restorative justice, transformative practices, destigmatizing of mental health, really addressing those complex needs of the community. So that trauma-informed practices has a lot of subcategories to it.
Right.
Another phase of the training is professional, a big piece in the last couple of years, professional resiliency and self-care. And this, again, is across the board, families, teachers, our police department, our fire department, our counselors, our social workers, any helping professionals, in addition to the clients in the community that we serve. But, you know, interestingly enough, the symptoms of burnout and trauma response are the same, you
Mhm.
know, so again, it kind of goes back to that toxic stress and how individuals that are in the helping field need to really, you know, manage their own stress and their own health. So a lot of focus on self-care and professional resiliency. And then the last big piece of the phase of training right now, there's so many phases being developed, but right now is, and this has been more of a request from a lot of different community members, but de-escalation, you know,
Mhm.
going into agencies and going into community settings and again, the schools, and teaching people how to de-escalate highly intense situations when this is not typically their scope of practice.
Okay.
So I, again, work very closely with schools, very closely with our special victims unit and our PD. So making sure that all of the practices that we have there in collaborative efforts through the victim advocacy program are what's called victim centric through that trauma informed lens. So making sure that the investigation process as much as possible is really considering the unique needs of the victim,
Mhm.
understanding how their victimization or how their trauma is impacting their ability to, you know, retain memory, for example, to focus, to be able
Mhm.
to engage with the system. So that's first role is trauma educator and trainer. So basically training as many people in the community as I can about all of the varying layers and impacts of trauma and how it manifests in the development of the brain, development of the behavior, and our ability to navigate the world. Second role that I have here is what's called trauma healing specialist. And this is paired up with a family advocacy center. And this is where I'm creating a program, or we are creating a program that provides alternative options to traditional counseling. Traditional
Okay.
counseling does run adjacent to the program, but this program focuses on more, and this is all, you know, evidence-based, but more embodied healing through embodied living. So this is where we'll dive into trauma-informed yoga, music, art, connecting to nature, gardening, you know, really getting back to that sense of belonging, integrating cultural heritage projects, integrating shared community engagement, you know, really getting to the root of the human experience as a vehicle for healing from trauma.
Mhm.
Within this part of the program as well, thinking very, very preventatively and restoratively in terms of the family system for generational trauma, erupt these patterns for continuing. So that is the separate role, really getting into, first part is educating people about
Right.
what's going on,
Right.
implementing best policies and procedures. And then the second role is to really help our community members heal in a very holistic, dynamic, person-centered, humanitarian way. And again, that does complement counseling if people want it. But what we find is a lot of individuals in a lot of different communities don't desire traditional counseling. And so really getting to the roots of some integrative and holistic care that provides some, you know, sense of belonging and
Mhm.
some sense of expression and some sense of harmony within themselves, the people that support them, and the environment, whether the literal natural environment or the creation of new community, because we need that in order to deal with all of the things.
Mhm. Okay.
So that was a mouthful, sorry.
That's okay. That's okay. Um, and just a question, since the pandemic, has that altered in any way how you deliver these developments, like these trainings? Like, is it still in person or is it hybrid, or how do you deliver these?
Both, yeah. In the
Okay.
beginning, definitely we did hybrid. And I think in the beginning it was also difficult because so many people were still in a state of shock.
Mhm.
Um, Now the trainings are more so in person,
Okay.
but we also do offer hybrid, and a lot of, I mean, I try to stay specific to Tempe, but I'm doing trainings all over the valley. And so depending on how far out, or even some of the more rural areas, it would be Zoom, just because I do want to make them accessible.
Okay.
So we do a mix of both. Um, I'm old school and prefer in person, just
Right.
because people heal people, we build
Yeah.
a relation amongst one another more naturally, I think, in person. So, but we adapt, right?
Right. Yes, definitely. Okay. And who oversees Care 7, like with all the decisions that are being made, like with the agency? Who's the one
Yeah,
that?
Kristen Charlo is my direct boss, and then above her is Paul Bentley, and then Naomi Farrell. So it kind of moves up. Care 7 is a division of the Human Services Program at the City of Tempe. So we are embedded in Human Services. So there's a long chain of command up through Human Services, but my direct supervisor is Kristen Charlo.
Okay. And in the mission statement, referral is mentioned. So who does Care 7 partner with if you have to refer somebody out to
Yeah,
certain services?
Yeah, it really depends on the needs of the client. So it could be any social service provider in the community. We do work very closely with Hope for individuals experiencing homelessness, and our veterans case manager works very specifically with a lot of supports specific to veterans. We work closely with child help and some of the domestic violence shelters, that our advocates use regularly. And then, any myriad of other community agencies, just depending on what the needs are. And I think that's one thing that's really great about our team is for those people that are doing direct service and direct case management and direct advocacy, they are your super knowledge base for that. You could call them in here and ask, hey, I need a resource for somebody that has A, B, C, and D, and they know it like that. I unfortunately don't, know it like that, but yeah.
Okay. And how does Care 7 measure success?
That's a very good question. And I know with my role, it is half grant funded. So I am always gathering data on all of the trainings that I do. I'm always doing a pre and post survey regarding, how familiar were you with this content? What was the quality of content? Is this content applicable to the audience of people that you work with? Before and after surveys, we gather that data. All of our programs, our youth specialist program also gathers data. Victim advocacy, every program gathers data in their own way. Mine is primarily survey based, and community outreach based will be how we gather a lot of the community input towards what goes on into the FAC.
Okay. And what is one downside of your job, of your role, that you would say?
Well, I genuinely love what I do. So I kind of have that mindset of if you love what you do, it's never a day's work. I think that on a personal level, the downside would be that I'm spread thin. There is such a need to get this information out there. And some of these subjects people are really, really responsive to, and some people are not really responsive to. And so it can be difficult for me to feel, like I'm providing information that I believe in and that's really powerful and necessary for people to understand. But if there's ever resistance, and really because of the pandemic, most people are like really ready to learn. People are recognizing, wow, there is stuff going on in our community, let's learn about it. But really just spread thin, it's and it can sometimes be hard work. I am constantly, even though my expertise is in trauma, it's hard to be around and talk about trauma all the time,
Right.
So it's that part is difficult.
Okay. And so what is the most rewarding for you, would you say?
Yeah. Empowering people through knowledge. I am also a, believer in change. And I am very passionate about, even if it's a little voice in my time here on this planet, to, put some intention and energy towards bringing awareness to people and trying to encourage new ways of being in our own bodies, in our own process of healing, in our own discovery of self, new ways in our families, new ways in our communities, new ways in our institutions. If there's one thing that I've seen in this work, it is, and this is a big component of my trainings as well, is now that we understand trauma, how do we instate protective factors, and how do we, instate resiliency? And if there's one thing that's a takeaway, a big takeaway, is that we can heal. We can overcome things. We just need to come together to do it, and we need to continue to have these conversations, and that provides a lot of hope for me and a lot of meaning. It's very, very rewarding work. I love working on behalf of our community, people.
Okay, and that actually concludes the questions that I had for you. Was there
Okay.
anything else that you wanted to add?
I don't think so. I feel like I rambled much longer than you wanted me to.
That's okay. I just want to thank you again. And your agency seems to be doing a lot for the community, for the Tempe community, right? And you said you have been going out of Tempe as well. So that's very commendable. You help a lot of population, like you said, the homeless, the schools. I mean, you touched, the agency helps like everybody, everybody.
Yeah.
And I like how you said you were all inclusive. It's all about equality. And again, Robin, I just wanted to thank you for taking time out of your busy schedule and helping me with this. And that concludes our podcast. Thank
Great.
you
Thank you
so
for-
much.
You're welcome. Thank you for having